Hey everybody, hi there. This is Karen Jackson, and you are now watching Chat with Sandy and Karen. Sandy's going to jump on in a little bit with us. um, I have a guest today. We have a guest today, and Emma is a very special friend. She is from our Google Innovator cohort, Sweden 17, and she is now going to talk a little bit about creativity and the work that she's doing with students and in her schools, and who knows where we'll drift from there. But we welcome Emma. How are you doing today?
Oh, Sandy, it is so great to be here and just see your face again from Sweden because it's been almost 4 years. But I'm doing really well.
Good, good, good. Good to hear. Good to hear. So are you what tell us kind of what your job is now, if you want to talk about that for a little bit, about like the type of students you teach, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Karen, I'm gonna throw you a bit of a curveball. I actually had a baby in May. So
Oh,
I was like, I didn't
congratulations.
even tell Karen this. So I have a little pandemic baby. He's 1 year old now. So I've been on a maternity leave because I'm in Canada. I'm sorry, we do get a little bit longer. And then I've just taken a leave for the rest of the year, and I'm going to start fresh in September. But I am a middle school teacher. I'm in Victoria, British Columbia. So if you look at the map of North America, I'm on that island. So being on the southern part, I'm actually below the Canadian American border. But we are a middle school. We have about 640 students. So we're a pretty big school for our area. Um, but I just believe in just creative and engaging and different learning opportunities.
Awesome. That's great. So I follow people on Twitter all the time, and it's interesting because I really sometimes I pay attention to where they're from. Other times I just kind of listen to what they say and follow links and things like that. And um, so, in your experience, how long have you been a teacher?
15 years now.
15 years. So you've met a lot of different educators. So,
Absolutely.
what's the difference in a Canadian educator and, let's say, any other country?
Oh,
That's important to Canadian educators.
um, that's certainly a big question. I have to confess, I'm not fully familiar with the curriculum of all different or
Hmm.
significant. But one thing that I did find, because I have traveled around, I've been to 30 of the states and have presented at different in conferences and whatnot. And one thing I noticed with British Columbia and other places, and not saying one strategy is better than the other, but I find assessment to be kind of a different. Where we are, we don't really do any like multiple choice. It does still exist a little bit, but it's a lot of inquiry based, hands on, being able to show you're learning in different ways.
Wow.
In BC, there's a lot of autonomy to deliver the curriculum however you would like. And there isn't, and maybe Karen or Sandy, or you can connect me, but um, there's not a lot of government-based assessments. There's only three. Like there's one in grade 4, one in grade 7, and one in like when they graduate. There's some form, but there isn't a lot of those formalized assessments. So we don't have to teach to a test, and I think that would be one different. Uh, but like I said, I think curriculum's evolving. But maybe Karen, you can add the perspective from Texas, but we don't, and pay is no connection to the achievement of students either.
Hmm. Well, that is pretty interesting. Yeah, and Texas has kind of been on a pendulum as far as when they first started doing state testing. Gosh, they went all the way down to first grade. It wasn't a sit down and multiple choice, but it was a curriculum based assessment, for first graders, because most students go to kindergarten and sometimes pre-kindergarten. So I think they felt like, of course, this was back in the 90s, long time ago,
Just
probably
a couple
before
of
you were
years
born.
ago.
Yeah. And but then they said, no, that's way too young. We're going to wait till third grade. So that would be like 8-year-olds. And so now they've kept the third, and then gradually, they'd say, well, they'll have a math and a reading, and then fourth grade will be writing, and fifth grade will be math, reading, science, and then seventh grade will add social studies. And then, it's just kind of it's been amorphous, really. And so that would go for about 4 years, and then teachers would, have to shuffle and figure out, well, is this going to be tested this year? Well, maybe not. And then they'd have a year where you kind of have a reprieve. And then the next year, they'll start up, and yes, we're going to test your students. So over the last 25 years, it's been in flux now, but there's still, and when, almost as a defense mechanism, you kind of you're teaching to the test, because you don't know when, or what kind of a test it's going to be. And sometimes it's textbook companies that make up the state tests, and sometimes they hire teachers to write the questions and approve them. And it's really messy. It's really messy.
Yeah. And we all know there's no, one perfect model of education that's going to work for all students. I mean, I think that's the bottom line wherever we are. But one thing I really liked, that the curriculum, we had kind of this big long list, like science in any grade, big long list. And they switched it all in every subject for every grade. There's 5 just larger, bigger ideas. Which is like, say we'd call it language arts equivalent of English, like English 7 would be, one big ideas might be to respond to text in a variety of different ways. And so as a teacher, you have a lot that you can do with that big idea. For sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I follow Trevor McKenzie, and I've read his books, and I really, it really resonated with me, just student inquiry. And now his third book just came out. It's about assessment. So I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that.
And fun fact, Trevor and Rebecca, because Rebecca is co-author on one of them. We're all from the same town. We're not from the same school, but we're very close in proximity.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So seeing Trevor, our journeys cross because we're very close in proximity. Yeah.
Right. That's good. Well, I did a book study. We went all the way to Portland from Texas to just sit in on a book study with his Inquiry Mindset. I think that was the name of his first book. And it was wonderful to be able to sit with an author and ask him questions, and then go through it. And it was my first experience using HyperDocs too. And he set up the HyperDocs first. We were interacting with the same group, and then we all met in Portland. It was a wonderful model of professional development. And
amazing.
So cool.
And powerful. And I just think, as educators, wherever we are, we're always shifting how we do things, shifting how we do assessment. And that's kind of what I've included some materials for Karen and Sandy, but like where some of my things come from is just wanting to have my students have different ways to show their learning and their thinking.
Yeah, that is so cool. I think that's, Sandy, you've talked a little bit about giving students a challenge, a problem, and then assessing in Sweden. How do you feel about assessment? What do you like about the way you assess students?
I think assessments, I like them because it's not someone else making tests that don't know our kids. We know the kids, and they are able to show their ability, and their creativity comes out. And everything is personal. So one may do it one way, which suits them, and they could get the same grade as someone who does it differently and suits them. So I like the assignments. Assessments is different to having that end of year rigid test, which just blanks students out.
And Sandy, I think you make such a great point is there's nothing wrong with assessments, but it's allowing those students, like we have all those students that are, you have the ones that can express themselves with words, and then you have another kid that may struggle to get the words out, but then will create this mind-blowing piece of art that captures so many ideas connected to what, a novel or something you've been doing. But I think, Sandy, that I really like how you mentioned they might do it different ways, but it can score very similar. Yeah.
I think something.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's just something you were saying earlier. We have a very similar testing as your school system. So we have one in 3rd grade, one in 6th grade, 9th grade, and then it's high school for us here, the last 3 years before university. But that's how they're assessed, the national tests here.
Yeah. No, that's very, and we do have, and something interesting that's happened just 2 years ago in British Columbia, they removed letter grades up until grade 8 and replaced it with a proficiency scale. And whenever there's change in education, there's always mixed reviews, right? We can be honest about that. There's always mixed reviews about change, but it's been incredible. So we now have a scale. It's mostly proficient, which means you fully understand the concepts at grade level. Developing means maybe you're just there, but you can pinpoint, maybe you're proficient at fractions, but developing at decimals. And then there's emerging, which means you're just diving into the material. But then we also have extending. Extending means you have demonstrated understanding beyond that of your current grade level. And it's been a really neat shift. And it's a focus from that final product of a letter grade to the mastery of individual skills, like being proficient at individual, proficient at a sentence, proficient at different computations. And it's been really powerful. It's been hard to shift because, and parents, it wasn't always an easy shift for some parents because, but I think it's been really great to hone in at the individual skills, because what truly does a letter grade tell us sometimes?
Right. And do the teachers themselves make up the assessments, or does that come from a committee at your school or a curriculum committee?
Oh, that's a really good question. So teachers, a lot of teachers make their own rubrics, but assessing kids on that proficiency scale is up to the teacher, like their criteria on different projects or assignments or ways to show their learning. It will all be ranked on a proficiency, and that's for all subjects across the board, like math, science. But high school is still letter grades because because right now we still have to enable kids to achieve post-secondary, where you want to move into. And so you can't do that complete change across the board until it's reflected at post-secondary. And post-secondary is not behind, but there has to be a way of deciphering, entrance to colleges and universities.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's evolving for sure.
That's awesome. So, Sandy, you teach at a high school, right?
Yeah, I teach. So I don't know how it is in America and Canada. So here, high school is for students 16 plus, 16 before they go to university. Yeah, so I teach the bigger kids.
So your university then doesn't require a GPA or a certain grade. They just have, the students have to have mastered their proficiencies or things like this, like that?
No, they still have to. I think the universities require certain criteria, certain grades or points. Yeah. You still have to get those depending on where you want to go.
Ours is still that too, where because our high school is grades 8 to 12. So I think just one additional grade than yours, Sandy. But in high school, you still get the letter grade, an average. We don't always call it like a GPA, but it's the same concept. You will get averaged out, and then universities will, work their way down the averages to fill all their spots.
Yeah, lots of grades here as well. It's amazing what they go through. I mean, listening to you, so in Canada and Sweden, and listening to Karen and the other educators we've had, guests we've had, we are all on a similar wavelength when it comes to education. We're not probably all doing the same thing, but we're all doing something so similar. It's just amazing. Everyone we've spoken to, we think our system is easy, but then listening to someone else, we're like, oh, it's not easy here, and it's not easy for them, or
Yeah, and there is no one perfect strategy, I think, for education. And I think that's partly why we love being educators, is because it's changing. And I'm sure we can all say no day is ever the same.
Really, Emma? I thought we like the grading, the long hours of marking. Tech, we like all that new tech that's coming out.
I hated to do homework when I was a child in school. And it's just so ironic that I chose a career where I have homework all the time.
and your work is never done. I think that's maybe the hardest adjustment for maybe newer teachers, is really realizing that you could work around the clock. There's always something you can do, whether it's an email or planning a lesson or collaborating. There's always something, and finding that balance is so important.
So how do you find a creative outlet? How do you find that balance? So you're not
yeah, that's a huge question. I am a very naturally just creative person. I've really realized, because as teachers, you really have that personal reflection of when you went to school and what worked for you and what didn't work for you. And I remember in school, and I loved all my teachers. They're just incredible. But I did remember doing like question sets, read a textbook, answer some questions, or study this material and do multiple choice. And it was great. And I did fine, but I really realized I like those creative outlets. I like to show my learning in different ways. And that has really, then transferred into my modern classroom. Is, we still do traditional numeracy and literacy and reading and responding to things. But I have been blown away when I have given just a little more open-ended, a little more flexible, or I get a list of options for students, a written option, a creative option. And it's those creative ones where I just kind of let them run with it, that I have been just blown away. Like no criteria sheet or no planning on my part would have yielded those results. And those kids, like I said before, that maybe have, struggled to write a sentence, or we teach them voice typing and read write, we teach them all these strategies. But then we just give them an opportunity to shine in the area that they love. And it blows you out of the water. And that's where a couple of the things I shared with you today, Sandy, has come from, is I then wanted to share some of the things we've been doing in my classroom with the world, essentially, because I could not even believe the things that students were creating.
Beautiful. May I show real quick, Sandy? May I show the piece that you shared with us?
Sure, absolutely.
While you're talking, go ahead.
Yeah. So when you open up, maybe I'll just say a couple things about it. But Sandy, which one? Or sorry, Karen, which one are you sharing?
The seashore, the cliffs, and the
perfect. So this is just an example of some of the things we're doing. This is all done in Google Draw, and it's done from scratch. And now, since we talked about going to Sweden and having that imposter syndrome and opening the doors, I now do virtual learning sessions across North America. So this is done in Google Draw. This is a local beach. This is a beach about an hour north from us here on the island. The West Coast is, of course, I'm surrounded by Pacific on all sides, but it's very, biodiversity is large, forests are large, waterfalls is gorgeous. But these are kind of the things I do with students. This is one that I actually created. So the original is on the right, and mine is on the left. So I teach students just how they can represent their identity So that was just one example, and Sandy and Karen is more than welcome to just share that out as an example of just one thing that you could do, and just translating it to the classroom. I have students, they'll depict a scene from a novel or a character, or we read Outsiders. I'm sure people across the world read S.E. Hinton's Outsiders. And I've had people use Google Draw to recreate Tulsa, Oklahoma, like where the novel takes place. Or we read, I think, like City of Ember or Parvana. And Parvana is the young girl in Afghanistan. And just the power they convey in an image is more powerful than they could ever convey in words.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
It's beautiful. I mean, yeah. I am not creative. I cannot do this. This is, I was like taken aback when I saw this. I thought, wow.
So when you, like, I can see so much this picture being used for so much, like conveying emotion and what, talking with students about what kind of emotion do you feel when you're looking at these kinds of colors? Why do you think why do you,
and even it's just the little things with technology, whether you're using Google or whether you're using Microsoft or any platform, the fonts you choose convey meaning, right? Like if you're choosing, I'm not a big fan of Comic Sans myself, but we know like Comic Sans is going to portray a different message than using like a Times New Roman or an impact font. So we talk about fonts, we talk about colors, and just that digital literacy of how just combining different colors and different fonts and different styles can really allow students to express themselves and share ideas.
That's beautiful. Really beautiful.
For our listeners who are trying to get hold of this image, what it looks like. As I said, I'm not creative. You guys want to explain it?
Well, one thing, we can put it in we'll put the link in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah, so and also it's just bit.ly. So if you're familiar with bit.ly, it's bit.ly/Mystic Beach. And that bit.ly will take you there as well. So bit.ly/Mystic Beach, all lowercase. And you will have a copy of that print and use it however you'd like. Use it to inspire. And maybe Sandy or Karen can drop some links. There's a couple other links, like the C is for create. I've actually made a digital literacy alphabet. Each letter has examples of student projects that we've done, connected to novels, connected to math, connected to everything. And then I've done a little formatting tip because I know it can be overwhelming for teachers to know, oh, there it is, where to start. So Karen, if you're able to just scroll down a couple letters, it doesn't really matter. Okay. But just maybe click on the A or the B or just pick one. But they're just examples of projects or ideas that you can do. And they're all done in Google Slides and Google Draw because they're besties. I don't know if you know, but Google Draw and Google Slides, they're best friends. They work interchangeably with each other. Letter E there was for the elements. I have my students take like elements from the periodic table and turn them into superheroes. So it's just, and the cool thing about that is they may not memorize all the elements on the periodic table, but they're definitely always going to remember their superhero and what makes that one special.
That is brilliant. I love it.
It's, but yes, so thoughtful, so imaginative.
And do you want to just click on H there, Karen? So this is a bit in Canada. Residential schools are a big part of Canadian history and Indigenous content is a huge part of our curriculum. And this to me is a very powerful image. So Olimon is the main character. It's in a book called Fatty Legs. And she comes home from being in a residential school because Indigenous children were stripped from their households. Very, emotionally, there's a lot to this in Canadian history. And it would be really hard to describe that disconnect in words. And so my students created these images because this is in northern Canada, so an Inuit girl. And this picture just conveys her disconnect from her family after being away and being stripped of her culture and not feeling like she belongs anywhere. So just really, really powerful images that say a lot without any words.
Now, there's something that's made the headlines this morning here in the, UK about Indigenous children in Kamloops.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard.
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Very sad. I found out the history about how the kids were taken away.
Mm-hmm. It's something in Canada that, I mean, it's a very sad, it's very, very complex, and there's lots to learn, and there's lots of truth to expose, and we're working towards reconciliation and acknowledging that, they are the first peoples of our country, and we have not been kind to Indigenous people, our government and people. So about learning and growing and moving forward and having this a part of the curriculum, and not just in British Columbia, but across Canada, Indigenous content and stories and ways of being and culture. It's a beautiful new part of our curriculum, but there's still lots of growth to be had.
Yeah, we had Anissa Jones from Australia. She was from Singapore 19. She was in the Google cohort there, but she was my mentee. But her project is for the Aboriginal people to, it's a website and just a whole curriculum and books and everything about just understanding different learning styles and understanding and working with people and listening and learning through art. And it's wonderful how art is a universal language.
It is absolutely. And I think you nailed it perfectly. It's about learning, and it's about understanding, and it's about, especially in Canada, exploring those truths of what happened. Because residential schools, they happened for over 100 years. So it's been a really big part. Canada is very new in the scheme of countries, and the majority of the time that we've existed, so have these residential schools. So a very big and important part of our curriculum.
Right. So important. That is. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, no, thank you. And maybe, I don't know, Karen, if you want to just show, the last thing is just for educators. When the pandemic hit, teachers are resilient, and they're flexible, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of places where you had to switch on the fly. One day you were in person and the next you're remote, and you don't know the day-to-day. And so this was the next thing I created. Very shortly, actually, after my little one was born, I was on mat leave, but I wanted to help teachers across North America. It isn't specific to Canadian curriculum except for the coins, but you can switch those out. But I made over 50 templates for teachers to use, and you're more than welcome to use it. All you have to do is copy the one you like and paste it in a new presentation under your own login. But they were designed, especially here in BC, it was instantly like into Google Classroom or some way to deliver your content to remote learners. So I just came up with these templates, and some are elementary and some are middle school, and some are even secondary if you go near the end. But if they can help you or make your life easier just to have that grab and go activity, they are all there. So there's graphic designers. There's things for math, because so many people think of slides, and this isn't a bad thing, but people just think of slides as a presentation tool. Let's do some research. Let's put in our information. We'll add some pictures and we'll present. But
Mm.
slides is a really powerful learning tool. Like there's binary code there. Like who would have thought teaching binary code, like computer programming
Do it
code
online.
via Google Slides, because then you can drop it, in a Google Meet, in MS Teams, whatever, and you can do live lessons. And whether you're remote or you're back in person, and being back in person is the ideal, I think, having those personal connections. But I wanted to give back to teachers because I wasn't in the classroom because I was just having a brand new baby. So I wanted to help out teachers through the pandemic.
They're really great. Again, so much creativity in them.
Oh, and the Bitmoji classrooms, and just those are actually linked to books as well. So I made virtual libraries, virtual field trips, just lots of great things for teachers. So that one is bit.ly/skip the slide design if you're interested. But there's lots of material, and you never have to ask. If something's helpful, please just use it.
Wow. So that's how anyone can get involved. They just
just use it. And my Twitter is at Emma Cottier, so it's an easier one. Most of these things, or even skip the slide design, are all available on my Twitter. You just might need to scroll depending on, because I've had these, this one is, about 6 months old or so, but just scroll through. I always, sharing is caring. I think we're all on the same team. Wherever we're teaching, whether we're in Canada, whether we're in Sweden, wherever in the United States, like we're all on the same team, and students are our game. They are our number one interest. So if something can help a student share their thinking or present a concept in a different way, I'm happy to help.
That is awesome. I'm gonna take a minute and I'm gonna put those links in the chat so that they'll show up during replays, etc. These are great because this is like little bits of all the professional development I've seen in the last year.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, and the thing is, I speak for myself, is sometimes I see what other teachers are doing, and I go, oh, I want to do that. Or I want to do that, but I want to put my own little spin on it. And that's okay too. Like, I'm totally fine if you're like, oh, I like the idea, but I would add this to it. Like, please do. Like, just make a copy, drop it into your own Google slide presentation, and add to it, or add corresponding lessons to it. There's always a lot of options to be had.
Right.
Right. So while Karen's doing that, Emma, last time we physically saw each other was in 2017.
Yeah.
Now, how have you been since? And how's your innovation project going?
Oh, well, yeah. I completed it, so that's great. My Google Innovator project was basically cooking up communication with parents through Google. So, and I look at that now, and it's not that it's not relevant. It is still very much relevant. But I think of all the growth over the last 4 years in classrooms, and communication is being cooked up. But I remember when we were in Sweden, I mean, teachers making websites was still kind of a newer thing. Yeah. And now, especially with the pandemic, it's not a new, I wouldn't consider it a new thing anymore. So, and just, thinking of one of the things with my project was basically inviting parents into the classroom virtually all the time. And I think now when we think of the pandemic and just really how much houses and schools got connected, right. But we've just done a really great job of evolving from that traditional parent-teacher interview. I mean, I love my parents and I want to meet with them and connect with them, but I want to just communicate with them all the time. Not so much more, just informally. And I think that's one of the things with these creative projects is parents can just say, hey, open up your Google Drive or open up your OneDrive or show me. And I think that's so cool with parents being able to see what their students are doing or their child is doing day in and day out. So that was my project. Sammy, well, I know you've probably already shared, but what about yours?
I think my project at that time was to make a bank of resources for language teachers, because when you're in Google Docs, you're doing spelling, punctuation, grammar, and you keep typing that in comments. I wanted to have a database where it was just like you could drag or drop or type in one word and it will fill out the rest. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. I teamed up with Sabrina and Isabel from our cohort. We did a project about bringing in digital tools, emphasizing women, making them, feel good about themselves and that they can do it. And that worked. We did that project for a little while. And then I think the pandemic happened. Everyone got so busy with everything. And then I dropped that project and I teamed up with Karen, and we're like, let's grab a cup and let's talk.
Was it a fika?
Yeah, fika.
Oh, I love it. And I think as not even, you don't need the title of a Google Innovator, but we're all educators innovate. They innovate day in, day out. And it may not be labeled as a project, but I think now, even in the 4 years, or even these, like all these little things that we do, or, whether it's a podcast or whether it's this like digital literacy alphabet, like they're all innovative projects.
Yeah.
Designed to help others.
Yeah.
I think this year has been a great eye-opener for many. And we've all innovated, we've all created, and we've made it work. We didn't want to let the kids down, I think, if anything. And you could see so many teachers are exhausted.
Oh, for sure. And I think everyone, we're just not the same person we were before the pandemic. There's been a lot of growth, a lot of reflection, a lot of reevaluating what's important to us and maybe what's not as important to us, and zoning in on the things that truly matter.
Yeah. And the things that are working. That's what I like about it, is there are so many, there are positive things happening now that where people are realizing, hey, this is actually working, and students who haven't been successful in maybe the traditional last 10-year education are suddenly blooming because they're a little bit more in charge of what they want to learn, and they can study at their own pace and when they want to, and when they have opportunity or when they have access. So.
Yeah. And I think adding to that, just that whole student advocacy piece, and I think it's, push students further in that direction of that need to communicate how we can help you. Like what is going to work for you right now? Because we all know during the pandemic, everyone's situation was different. And what might be working for one student isn't working for another. And that's, I think student advocacy was a big piece to come out of that, and supporting kids in different ways, because we all know remote learning from home looks very different for different people.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what else do you remember from Sweden? So fika was one. Karen, you mentioned one thing. Fredagsmos.
Which one?
Fredagsmos.
Oh, fredagsmos. Yeah, I didn't know how to pronounce it, but it's basically Friday evening time at home, chilling at home.
Yeah.
And
what about the stroopwafel?
Yeah, stroopwafel, but that's Netherlands, I think. I think originally, isn't that Dutch?
Probably.
I think so too. But whenever I think see a stroopwafel, even if it's at Costco, I was like, oh, my Swedish friends.
I know. Well, that's what we were introduced to it. So yeah, it's awesome. I
was really fortunate. I went to the Innovator Energizer in New York. And there was a few like Susan and Jacqueline. So I was able to connect there. And this offer sends all Sweden people. He works for Future Design School.
Quinn.
So Quinn, randomly, this was like a year and a half ago, he goes, Emma, I'm in your city. Want to say hi? And I was like, absolutely. I said, as soon as my bell goes and I dismiss my students, I'm hopping over there. I'm picking you up. I'm giving you a tour. And so I drove them all around and like showed him like, you know, if you're visiting this area, what things you'd want to see. And that's what I love most about things like this, like the podcast of professional learning is like, we might go 4 years without seeing each other, but you better believe if you happen to be in Victoria, British Columbia, that we are going to have a fika and I'm going to give you a tour and we're going to have some fun.
Absolutely.
I'm up for it.
All right. Come on over.
Come on over.
COVID pending, of course, like, you know, when travel's safe, come on over. I'll show you around.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Emma, it's been so wonderful to have you on our podcast. It's been so nice seeing your creativity and what you've been doing. Amazing.
Thank you.
And, you know, we are so happy that you are sharing your experiences with us. And let's hope we can catch up sooner rather than later and just have another cup of coffee and see what's happening in the world and share your experiences with Karen and myself.
I would love that more than anything. And Karen and Sandy, thank you for inviting me. It was such an honor. Like I told you before off screen, this is my first podcast. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and hearing what I have to say. It's all good experiences. And when you push that slightly uncomfortable zone, the best things happen. So all the best. And I hope that maybe some of those links that we shared with you today are helpful in any capacity.
Yeah. They're perfect. And to all our listeners, you can find us on Spotify, on Apple and Anchor. Just put in chat with Sandy and Karen and we are there.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.